Welcome. Hi. For a couple of other people, we should have about 20 people joining us today. So we'll just wait a minute or so and then we can start. If you do feel comfortable, please do have your cameras on. I know we're recording, but it's really, really nice as a panelist to see your beautiful faces. It's actually really lovely to do that. If anyone would like to add what country you're calling in from today into the chat, that would be really beautiful. Welcome everyone. This is really exciting. It's really exciting to get back to the country air for 2023 and to kick off with a really sensational panel this year. The Country Air is presented by Regional Arts New South Wales. It's a monthly online discussion panel on the key issues facing arts and culture in regional Australia. The Country Air aims to directly engage with people living and working in regional New South Wales and beyond across Australia. Today is Friday the 10th of February 2023. It's 11 a.m. summertime in New South Wales, and this is a really new time slot for us to do, a daytime slot. My name is Dr Sally Blackwood, and I'm your host for this morning's Country Air panel, in which we're going to discuss gender, sexuality and the arts in regional New South Wales. Today I'm calling in from Gadigal country, and to audio describe myself, I'm sitting in an off-white room. To my right is a window with Venetian blinds. There's a minimalist glowing light globe on a stand with a beautiful rainbow cape in the background. I'm dressed in navy blue. I have pale skin and blondish hair. And next to me, I have my little rainbow gay bear friend. Housekeeping to start off, we are recording today's session. So the Country Air is recorded by Regional Arts New South Wales so that audiences will be able to access this discussion online after the event. Obviously, if you don't wish to be filmed, please feel free to turn off your video. But as I mentioned before, if you are comfortable, please leave it on because it's really nice to see all your beautiful faces. We encourage participation, so we invite you to please add questions and comments to the chat box, and thank you for putting what country you're in. Today, managing the chat box, we have the delightful Dr. Julia Georgie, and she's our Admins and Projects Officer at Regional Arts New South Wales, and she's going to feed the questions into a chat summary at intervals this morning. The panel will run. Thanks, Georgie. Thank you. The panel today will run for an hour and will conclude at midday. So at New South Wales time. In a moment, I'm going to introduce our esteemed panel and kick off the discussion with a couple of prepared questions. Before I introduce you to our speakers and lead you through our conversation, I'd like to conduct an acknowledgement of country. So I acknowledge that we're gathered here today across New South Wales and Australia, across various First Nations land that has never been ceded. I'm calling in from Gadigal country, and I thank the custodians of country, story and songlines, and remind myself to always tread gently like the Dinawan, which is a Gamilaroi word for soft-footed emu on this land. So let's all tread gently. Gender, sexuality and the arts in regional New South Wales. Let's jump in. Let's meet our fabulous panel. So we start with Miss Cadance Bell. She's an Australian storyteller and Bogan philosopher. She is described by Benjamin Law as the human equivalent of Halley's Comet, a once-in-a-lifetime blazing talent. Now, doesn't everyone want that? That's fantastic. Cadance is a celebrated author, director, producer, writer. Her memoir, The All of It, A Bogan Rhapsody, which is quite extraordinary, I recommend you read it, was released in July 2022, so just last year, to critical acclaim. She's the first transgender chickie to be a champion of Women's Health Week. She's written for The Guardian, Mamma Mia, The Big Issue, Rainbow Roo, and her first fiction novel The Letters to Our Robot Son releases on Audible this year. Katie's major documentary films, The Rainbow Passage for Network 10, Screen Australia, and Who I Am, are the world's first documentary exploring intersection of gender diversity and neurodivergence. She's a popular speaker. She's been at events such as Queer Stories, The Antidote at Sydney Opera House, and dozens of radio programs. Katie is a co-founder of Rainbow Day, which celebrated its 20th year last year and raised almost $1 million for charitable causes. She's the founder of Threcky, promoting mindful kindness, and her mission is to unmake prejudice, which is a beautiful mission, by encouraging audiences to get to know LGBTQIA+ stories. Cadance lives in regional New South Wales with her fiancée Amanda. She likes Pokemon Go and short walks to the fridge. She's openly transgender and freaking loves burritos. I love that. Thank you. Good morning, Cadance. Welcome.
Hello. Good morning. Thank you so much for having me. I just realized that I'm like that bio needs to be cut down.
It's fabulous. I love it. Will and Brett. All right, so Will Miller and Brett Boulton, who you can see here with their beautiful banner behind them, are directors of Rainbow on the Plains Festival. Will and Brett are members of the Hay Mardi Gras board who deliver Rainbow on the Plains. And Will was born in Hay and left to progress his career before returning to Hay with his husband in 2021 to take care of his father. Brett was born and raised in Pambula, which is in the Bega Valley Shire in New South Wales, and attended university in Coffs Harbour before heading to Canberra with the events industry. Will and Brett met in Canberra, were married in 2019. And both Will and Brett's passion for providing LGBTQIA+ awareness in rural and remote communities is their utmost priority. They work with youth, local business, governments, as well as amazing allies, and it's a dream job for them to organise Rainbow on the Plains Festival. Will's 18 years of work in government and Brett's strong background in event management has meant that they can elevate the festival from a parade and a dance party to be now a safe space for learning, growing and connecting. Thank you so much for being here, Will and Brett.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thanks for having us. I'm like, ooh.
And we're very honored to join you from Rotary Nari Nari Lanes. Thank you so much.
Thank you. And last but definitely not least, we have Gavin Prendergast, who's a manager of regional outreach at ACON. And Gavin manages a small team that travels to regional centres in the Illawarra, South Coast, Murrumbidgee and far west regions of New South Wales, so all over New South Wales. He's worked with ACON in the HIV and sexual health field for 10 years, specialising in community engagement and partnerships. Thank you so much for being here, Gavin. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. I should have been a little bit more detailed with my bio. I sound like the most least interesting out of everyone.
You have a chance now to tell us all about what you do.
Well, I'm based in Sydney, so I just wanted to drop that right at the very beginning. I'm not a regional person, but I lived through my colleagues and the work that I do, and so I get to experience, I get the best of both worlds, I guess. I live in Sydney with my partner of 15 years, happy queer man, and I really enjoy what I do. So I'm really pleased to be here and to share this awesome space with you great humans.
Thank you so much, Gavin. That's beautiful. Thank you. All right, should we kick off our discussion? Gender, sexuality and the arts in regional New South Wales. So today's discussion coincides with Sydney World Pride, celebrating the LGBTQIA+ communities in their diversities. So today we're going to explore the themes of belonging, safety, acceptance, representation, and being our true selves. I'm going to start by asking Miss Cadance Bell the first question. So Cadance, I'm going to throw you a tricky one just to start. Is being gay, trans or non-binary understood in a regional context?
Yes. I think that wherever we are, whatever our environment is, that has an influence on who we are as people, and that is going to inevitably change our experience of, being queer people and moving through the world. I don't think that. I think sometimes a lot of people think that there is a massive divide between country and city when it comes to queerness, and you can sometimes hear these really stark stories between people who, they'll say, look, my experience of being queer in the country was quite difficult, or other people will say, I've had no problems whatsoever. And I tend to find that I'm one of those people that has been a lot luckier than most. However, that said, I still grew up in the 90s in a country town that I think, in an era where we just didn't really support the idea of gender diversity, except as an extension maybe of mental illness. And so I think that because country towns, we do tend to be exposed to one another, and because we do know each other's business. I mean, I grew up, in Mudgee. Oh my God. To this day, my mum is still the intersection of all news in the town, and she doesn't leave her house. I don't know how that's even physically possible. She hates the internet, doesn't do social media, but she knows everything that everybody ate for breakfast this morning in Mudgee. So I think that it's impossible to be queer in a country town and not, well, either have other people know about it or live with the fear that people will know about it. And I think that as a consequence, that shapes the way that we move through the world, the way that we think about ourselves. And so I think, yeah, to answer your question, absolutely. I don't think it's the only dimension. I think that there are many more important things, but I definitely think that there is an interplay there that is so nuanced, and so there's so many things I think that can multiply. And I'm also a big believer in geolocational memory too. I have to say that when I'm writing my books, I will only write about places that I can experience. So even I'm writing a sci-fi novel at the moment. It's set around the Blue Mountains and Sydney. I spent a month just in the wilderness there, just to understand that landscape better, because I understand the way that geospatial memory, it's so important to our identities. Discovering new places and figuring out where we are and having to understand what are the rules of a new environment. These are all primordial, evolutions. These are things that are deeply embedded into us. And as a consequence, I think that they link so deeply to our identity, and that idea of space is so important. So yes, for all the reasons and many more, I think it would be very difficult to separate those two ideas.
Thank you. It's really beautiful thinking about place, and I think we'll come back to that too in a minute. I'd like to continue with you for 1 second, Cadance, and ask about belonging. And I'm curious to know how belonging is framed when you're trans or gender diverse, and specifically in a regional area.
Yeah, before I do, I just remembered to describe, I'm going to do a quick audio description.
Awesome.
So I'm wearing a purple top. It is Cadbury purple. I also have Cadbury inside me, but you can't see that. You just have to take that one on faith. I've got 3 light strips behind me. They represent 3 Tree. That's a project that I'm undertaking over the next 10 years. It's all about light and bringing light into the world. So they are 3 red striped lights behind my head. I have a cool microphone, which I picked up super cheap because I'm a tight ass. And I have matching headphones, which I got for the same reason. And that's my environment. Belonging. Yes. Okay. So yes. All right. So there's this thing about being trans that you do have to, before you come out, we call it cracking our egg. It's when we accept to ourselves that we are transgender, that we are not cisgender, that that we are different in some way. Between that moment and the moment that we come out, so coming out is when you tell other people that discovery, there is a big period there where I think you will question the nature of belonging more than any other time in your life. Like, I look back on it now, I loved coming out. I know it's not popular to say that. Like, it's supposed to be, difficult and traumatic, and I had a couple of weird encounters, but otherwise it was cool. It was like, hey, like, I'm proud, let's talk about this. I'm the person I've always wanted to be. But the fear was still there at a bedrock level. And I strategized for months and months and months about who I would talk to, how I would approach it with them, what language would I use for them in particular. Because belonging, it's an essential part of who we are as people, and trans people and queer people know better than most the difference between the families that we're born with and the families that we make. And I think that is a very important thing, particularly for younglings out there, for young queer people, to understand that it is okay to build your life as a mosaic of places you belong. You are not a singular thing that is the property of any one group. And I think that as queer people, we need to experiment. We need to find those places, and we need to understand that they are legion. And we need to, because in a way, we have to learn from one another. And without that diversity of being, you can't see what you can't be what you can't see. So without being in those groups and belonging to those different groups, how are we ever really supposed to know the extent of who we are? And so I think, I don't know if that answers your question. It felt like a good waffle, but I think that's beautiful. The nature of belonging for me.
Yeah, I asked you a very big, complex question. And so for the complexity of the answer, that's really beautiful. And it also makes me think of, oh gosh, so many things that I think I'll come back to a bit later. Sort of plant the seed. I love the idea of family being who you gather, perhaps your tribe. I think of the arts as being a big family. I think there's so many tribes there. And you talked about belonging in place. I'm wondering, we'll come back to this, but is place people as well?
Oh, that is a noodle scratcher. I like that. Let's come back to that.
We'll come back to that. That'll be
promise, Doc.
All right, let's jump to Will and Brett. We just talked about coming out. So is it easy to come out in regional New South Wales? And is it easier, like, does being an artist or having the arts as part of your daily routine, being connected to the arts, does that help?
Yeah, great. So just to start off with a audio description for us. So myself and my husband are here in the same room. We're in our living room. There's our couch and our bedroom door. We also have our poster behind us from our last festival, which has a rainbow and our logo. We're also wearing blue shirts with our logo printed on that as well for Rainbows on the Plane. Cool.
It's a very good question, and I definitely will be only answering it on behalf of myself, because everyone's journey and story and experience, as Cadance has mentioned, it's so different. So for me, living and growing up in a town like Hay, for those who have been to Hay, it is a solid community. It's its own village. So the people all do know each other's business and what they have for breakfast. But they also look out and care for each other and really understand. Hay people, like probably most rural people, are just curious, inquisitive. They don't get everyday exposure to the big world. They watch Today Tonight or a current affair, but they really don't get to experience. So if I've found that investing time, patience, ways of education like festivals, and having the incredible team like ACON come out to our community to inform and educate, they're more than happy to come along with your journey if you open your heart and let them. And that's what my experience in Hay has. I've got an incredible family, both blood and chosen. and my family changes, depends on where we're at and what we're doing in our lives. That makes it so much easier. For other people, probably not. If you've just moved to a rural community and you haven't got your networks, it's a hard journey to do alone, and it's easier to find yourself alone in a rural community. So you don't have the pop-in support and the facilities where you could find a community to connect with to help you get through a challenging time. So for me, yes, it was easy. It was easy because I had my village, I had aunties, I had uncles, I had friends, I had family, I had support through schools. It was pretty obvious I was going to be a gay boy, a gay male. But through high school, it wasn't my journey, it wasn't my story. Through that stage of my life, it was sports and friends and playing tennis and squash. When it became my identity, it was easy because I had all that prep work and all that support. But so, Freddie?
Yeah, it's definitely a journey. Like talking with Cadance there about the journey of planning of how you're going to come out and like those conversations of what's going to happen. So I didn't come out to my family until after I moved away to Coffs Harbour to do university. And so I had a 14-hour drive back to my family to tell them and stuff. And during that whole time, you're just processing what's going to happen. Like, what conversations am I going to have? What are they going to say? What am I going to say? What's this mean? Am I like driving home to like grab my stuff and then leave and never come back? Like, is that the scenarios that play through your head? And that's a really interesting journey that sort of different people have to take on their own and how they experience that. And it was great. I had a really good coming out to my parents, but that's not always the case as well. So that's a really hard thing. And being in those rural areas what's that support? What's that other family that's there ready to kind of scoop you up and give you that support that you need, so that, yeah, they have got that support and don't go down a dark and scary road as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you for sharing your journeys, because they are all personal and all about finding self. And thank you. It's really beautiful. Thinking about support, Gavin, I'd love to jump to you, because in your experience of queer festivals and events in regional New South Wales, how does art making or sharing by gender diverse artists transform communities?
Thanks, Sal. Hi, everyone. Audio description of myself. I'm sitting in a small white room with an ACON banner behind me, which is an aqua colour that says "Here for Regional New South Wales" with a finger, what's that? The two-fingered salute, the nice one though, the peace sign that has a rainbow colours all over it. I'm a cis pink man with no hair and kind of a gingery grey beard happening, and a headset from work. I didn't pay for mine, Katie. This was a connection through the ACON family. Hallelujah. So lovely question. So art, I think, has traditionally been a safe space for people to be themselves, and I think that that's something that resonates quite well with the queer community. Hearing other people's stories, seeing their creations gives us permission to be ourselves. I think Katie's comment about the mosaic of bits and pieces of our lives being pulled together to create ourselves was a really powerful statement. Thanks for that, Katie. Seeing other people through art overcoming struggles, seeing other people in art, how they cope with life, is really quite a powerful thing. And when we're in regional spaces at events, awesome events like Will and Brett's Hey, Rainbow on the Plains, there's even a deeper connection when it comes to art. It's a really empowering and powerful experience to see other people coping with life or living with life or being the best version of themselves. Art is a beautiful conduit for us to be ourselves. And I think at the end of the day, that's what it's all about. It's just feeling safe and secure and feeling happy within yourself to be your authentic human self. So vehicles like Rainbow on the Plains or Lismore tropical fruits all the festivals that have popped up across regional New South Wales, which is just fantastic. These are beautiful conduits and beautiful vehicles for us to be authentic. And having the art around the peripheral is just beautiful. And it's, you know, traditionally been a queer thing to do. Let's create some art. We've got the rainbow. It's gorgeous. How can you back off from that? We're starting from a really lovely base with that. And, you know, we're all covered with the rainbow flag, which is beautiful. Sorry, now I'm rambling.
Thanks, Gavin. It's really beautiful. Thank you for talking about that support and safe spaces. Cadance, I'd love to jump to you and ask you, for you, what is a safe space, and how do we perhaps ensure that these safe spaces exist?
Safe space. Yeah, that's one of those, it's one of those concepts that is simultaneously silly and essential. It has become almost, it has become almost a joke. Like, it is one of those great gags now in film and television, which makes me so happy that the concept is actually permeated such that it can be, you know, spoken about that way. I was watching something recently, and I think it was Harley Quinn, and there was these two Batman villains talking about, you know, wanting to create a safe space for themselves. I was like, yes, that's exactly it. And I think a safe space is what it really means is the capacity to express without limit. And I think that that is everything for humans, because we are not like any other species on the planet. Most animals respond to information, you know, hunger, fear, danger, temperature. We change it. That is what makes us, that's what defines us. That is what the essential capacity that has made us, you know, technologically advanced. It is at the root of our evolution, is that capacity to change information. And that requires a degree of experimentation. It requires error. I am a professional failure. Like, I am so good at failing. And when it comes to failing, like on my transition, holy shit. You should see some of the photos from when I first attempted makeup. My God, like it's, I think they are technically war crimes if I showed them to you. So I won't. But if I had have actually gone out and just done that in the street, oh my God. I think it probably would have completely arrested all of my progress. I think I would have swallowed all of that, and it just would have become more self-hatred. So without that capacity to be able to explore and experiment and let's be honest, just screw up again and again and again, surrounded by people who are tolerant of that very same thing, without that, we will never fully have the capacity to realize what we can be. And that's what a safe space is. And that's what a safe space should be and can be. And I do love that they've become kind of silly. I think that's it just means that they've become another tool, you know, in our tool set to deal with our mental health, our arts, and our communities.
That's the most succinct understanding of a safe space that I've heard. So thank you. I'm going to repeat it back. The capacity to express without limit. That's really incredibly beautiful.
I don't listen when I speak. That actually did sound pretty good. I like that.
Because it is a simple yet complex space. So thank you for articulating that so well. I'd like to just continue on with that. Will and Brett, have you got something to add about safe spaces for you, of what that is for you in building a festival?
Yeah, so I've this little story that I always come back to is before when they did the first Hey Mardi Gras Rainbow on the Plains Festival, before we were involved. So we drove the 5.5 hours from Canberra. We hired a minibus. We got a bunch of friends together and came out. We picked some from Wagga, some from Sydney, all different places along the way. But one of our really good friends and their daughter is asexual and very shy, like barely 2 words out of her unless feels really comfortable, like at the dinner table or something like that when she's with friends. But she came to the festival, and we were at a VIP, the ACON VIP launch that Gav knows about, and it was so beautiful because she just disappeared. She just disappeared off and started talking to all these people, and just really came out of her shell in that environment, which was like so beautiful for us to see. And her parents, who are really good friends, that's something that we always talk about and come back, and having that space to just be you. And often sometimes it is removed from where you actually live or where you normally do your daily life. But having that safe space is something that is really crucial in sort of people growing and being able to express themselves. And in rural regional areas, it's really in that educational space, as Will would know, is we're talking about publicans that have run pubs for 40 years and trying to just have a chat with them across the bar while you're having a beer on a Friday after you've mowed the lawns or whatever that is. It's having those conversations with them to try and get them more inclusive and more able to, it's never going to be 100% safe space, but actually being able to express in a community. So once you've done your safe space with yourself or your really close friends, then I've been able to take that to the next step and go, okay, cool, I can go to the pub and it's actually really safe, and there's no there's no prejudice that's going to come out in that environment. But
yeah, and I think our festival creates a safe place for people to self-educate. So examples through our festival, last year we were so proud that we were able to get a drag king to come to perform, not for the performance but for the education piece. And not only did Justin bring the house down with their performance, the conversation for hours afterwards, and still that I never knew drag kings existed. They are so cool. So, we're like, all right, challenge accepted. This year we've got a non-binary drag performer coming. We can't wait to see the Hey people embrace and just suck all that knowledge. And poor Justin was hit up with a million questions, again, because rural people want the exposure, they want to learn. They will not get that without the support of like the Southwest Arts and the ACONs and the grants and the sponsors that we get. So some people see it as a party, and it's a party, it's a celebration, it's embracing, but it's fooling people into being educated and learning in a fun, safe space. So it's a trick, and it's a great trick to do. And you see people year by year in this community become bigger and better allies, and not just saying I'm an ally, but knowing what that means. To know what an ally is. You can't just say I'm an ally because I wear rainbow. You need to be an ally because you want to learn and understand and go on the journey, and be confident enough to be able to ask us questions that we can answer and educate along the way.
Thank you so much to both of you. Exposure has come up a couple of times, and I think that's really beautiful, and the way in which you expressed exposure creates allies, so that ability to have that conversation. And I just wanted to also pick up on the storytelling from through the arts, that storytelling is really the key to understanding, because the first story that you told us was so clear. I'm sure we can all imagine what that story is and the use of that storytelling. Therefore, I can see Katie nodding her head as a beautiful storyteller, how important that is for understanding. Gavin, I'd love to jump to you in terms of continuing that, but also thinking about what support mechanisms are out there, what exists for LGBTQIA+ communities, and maybe especially for young people. That would be great.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And just to continue on with that theme of safe spaces, it's one that we have, ACON has tried to compact down into a simple sticker that we could put on the front of a organization or a bar or a club's window. That's just a symbol that says this place is a welcoming and safe space for community. So there's the Welcome Here project, which is a long-running project at ACON. It used to be known as the Safe Space, and it was originally a concept that came up when back in the bad old days when gays and lesbians were being, and trans people were being beaten or were, you know, physically assaulted or verbally threatened in the streets. So it comes from a pretty awful part of our history. But since then, it has evolved into this beautiful concept of a welcoming place rather than a safe space. So that's where we're at with that. So just blending into the conversation with Katie and Brett and Will, that the concept of a safe space is something that is really important, where you can be authentic, where you can be yourself, where you can be with your tribe or peers or people who won't hurt or be horrible to you, which is nice. So just thinking in a more broader way about the way that we support people that exist, that live in our communities. There's different levels of support. So there's things like service providers that exist in regional areas, organizations like Headspace and Lifeline and ACON, where there's opportunities to have face-to-face connection with service providers who are aware of the litany of struggles or challenges that queer people that face in regional settings. There's lots of online and virtual support that is offered across the board. So thinking of ACON, we do things like workshops and peer support, LGBTQ plus inclusivity training. We do things like sponsor community groups and events with in-kind support or with cash. And we narrow it down and do things like a location guide. So we create a guide for regional hubs or regional cities that have a list of community groups and support referral services that people can connect to. Having community groups on the ground, I think grassroots support, being able to go somewhere where there's friendships and belonging is so important. And that's where the Pride events really kind of shine. They've sprung up all over the state, like I mentioned before. And these create areas or communities where people can come together and connect, network, they can make friends, they can become aware of services and referrals that exist in their regional areas. And so that's something that we're really proud of, that these Pride events are really gaining momentum and really proving to be spaces where people can come and connect and be safe and meet other people. Young people, I think, you know, that with the onset of the internet age, I'm of age that I can say that, they really have another portal to connect with other young people who are like them. So there's, like I said, Headspace, which are a brilliant service provider, but Q Life, 2010, -18, Trans Hub, they all offer online support, peer support, referrals, counseling, and there's lots of online content that young people can connect with and not feel so alone, realize that there are other people out there like them, and there's loads of ways that they can connect on an online space, which is I don't know if it's just as good as meeting in person, but it creates a base where young people can have the beginning of their mosaic, you know, the beginning of their chosen family or their connections with other queer people to start their journey, I guess.
Thank you so much, Gavin. There's so much information in there. I would love it if you could, if you've got something either to put in the chat, or if not, we can put it up online afterwards when we put the recording up. I think that'd be great to have a list of all the service providers and what's out there, because it's incredibly important.
I'll share a list with you afterwards. I should have prepared it so I could have dropped it in the chat. Sorry.
No, perfect. It's perfect. Well, we'll put it up online on the Regional Arts New South Wales website. I think that would be terrific. Julia, are there any questions sitting in there for us? Please feel free to ask any questions, anyone, if you have questions or statements.
Yes, so we had just a comment from Carrie Ann, and she said that it's interesting that through Rainbow on the Planets that you have created a safe space for ordinary people to ask questions. And that was, I think, a very good expression of our feeling, because we were all fascinated by the story, I guess.
Yeah, and that's something that we, as Rainbow on the Plains, we're like, with the bad term, the only gay in the village, but that often does come to that scenario that we are a smaller part of the community. So we rely so heavily on our allies to be part of our community with us. Like they're not just there to kind of sit on the sidelines. We want them to be part of what it is as well, and to explore, because there's a lot of people that maybe somewhere in the flag of the rainbow and not know or not understand what's going on, and having that availability to understand that, or the knowledge there to back that, gives them opportunity to explore themselves or help support their children or friends or colleagues or whoever that is in that environment, and not just supporting them for the LGBTQI perspective, but if there's any disabilities or anything, just supporting your fellow man and really trying to, or woman at that point, or person, trying to actually just be a really good citizen within the town. And we find that there's a really good township environment here in Hay, and it's really lovely to see that we don't see everywhere, but it is, yeah, such a beautiful little environment here.
I loved Will's description of tricking people. Like, because I subscribe to that 100%.
I've done it my whole life.
It's perfect. It's
That one.
beautiful. I think story is at the root of all social evolution. So like, I loved hearing that little youngling story, but at the end of the day, yeah, that is it. You are trying to accidentally get people to learn something, aren't you? By having fun. I mean, that's what we do with, films and books, and it's exactly the same trick, as you called it. I love that.
Yeah, absolutely. Continuing with storytelling, Cadance, I'd love to ask you, as a writer and a storyteller, how does storytelling reshape a more diverse and accepting nation?
It's, as I said earlier, you can't be what you can't see. I think that, like, okay, I'm just going to take an esoteric example, something that really resonated and shit me throughout the years as well. It's one of these funny things that held a superposition in my heart, but would never have been possible were it not such a well-told story, and that's Priscilla, Queen of the Desert. Now, it shits me because as a trans person, that's not what being trans is. And for the longest time, that was the story that that got out there, was that basically we all rode on the top of buses and you weren't allowed in the buses. Why would you be? And that we were all just that little bit crazy, that little bit manic and unhinged. But at the same time, that story also really got Australia to talk about gender and gender expression. Now, it took a long time to get to a point where the average person could do anything that they did in Priscilla, but still, it was the beginning of that conversation. And that's what story does, is that a lot of the time, really, really bold people go, nah, I've had it. I want to talk about this. I want to reflect this. And so they sneak a little bit of themselves in. And then somebody else comes along and goes, oh my God, we can talk about this? Are you kidding me? All right, I'm going to sneak a little bit of myself into that. And then before long, we're just all absorbing this zeitgeist, this understanding of the ways that we can be. And that's why story is so important, in particular for queer people, because fiction lets us imagine a place that isn't. I remember when I was, how old was I? I was about 14, I think. I was in English class, Mr. Stewart. That was his name. He was a wild one. He used to do these things called sense poems because he was hungover. So he would rock on in and he'd be like, all right, I want you to write a sense poem. And that was his way of getting us to do something that, he didn't have to deal with. And so one day I wrote a short story instead. Now, this story, oh God, I'm actually like, it's emotional for me to talk about this, because in this story, I wrote about a day in which school children could wear whatever they wanted, whether that was boys that wore skirts, or, you know, girls that wore trousers. Like it was just this science fiction story about this school in the future that got past gender. And I wrote that as this, you know, this 14-year-old. It was just this fun little story. And of course, you know, my hungover teacher, like, he thought it was weird as hell. Good imagination. It was a way for me to express myself, just to tease it, just to experiment with it in a safe way, and in a way that has lived with me. I still remember that story so much. As an author today, as somebody who's, you know, actually makes money telling stories, it means a lot to me there. But it also means a lot to me as somebody who still had no idea what they were. I didn't figure out I was trans until I was 33. I'm 29 now. Don't ask me how that works. But for the longest time, I had no idea. I just thought, why am I stealing bras? Why am I wearing these clothes? But storytelling was a way for me to start to express all of my short films, all of my stories. There is a piece of me in there that I've been slowly trying to push out to the world to test, to say, hey, is it okay that I am this? So that, I think, is the power of story.
Thank you. It's almost, excuse me, an internal safe space. When you talked about a safe way of talking about and being who you are.
Yeah, I think the imagination is incredible. The things that we can do with it. The fact that we have to get past, I think, this idea that there is a set way to be, or that there is an advantage in that. I think that there is still so much that we don't express in ourselves. Now, what have we got? We got 16 people in here, 15 people, something like that. I would bet that there is a small piece of all of you that you are still keeping secret. There is probably still something that you have experimented with in a story or in a piece of artwork, maybe even just a doodle or something, that has leaked out of you. And I think that that's okay. I think that we don't arrive fully formed, and that we do need mechanisms for constant self-discovery of who we are. And yeah, I think it's, look, I have a storytelling addiction. I'd be doing it if they weren't paying me, and I know this because I was. So maybe this is a bit of a case of, you know, the used car salesman just being a little bit too hyped on their own product. But for me, the power of story, it's more than just entertainment. It does have the capacity to change lives. It does have the capacity to define societies and to shape civilizations, because it helps the individual and the society understand itself.
And Cadance, there was a beautiful point there where you're like, and stuff just starts spilling out of you. And I think that's something really beautiful, in that everybody's stories just doesn't, oh, I'm gay now, so that's it. That's my story. That ends there. That's my discovery done. Like, there's this whole journey for every single human in here that goes, actually, I'm still discovering myself. I'll discover myself until I'm old and gray. Like, that's the way that it goes. So having that safe space for people of all ages to actually express themselves is something that we always got to keep at forefront of mind as well, because we kind of get really focused on this stagnant stop that we've got to that point, rather than keep extending that and exploring further as well.
Bob Dylan said that she who is not busy living is busy dying. And I think that I can't say it any better than that.
Yeah, that's hard hitting. Thank you. That's really good. Julia, do we have any questions coming in?
Yes, actually, we had a few, and the first one is from Creative Collective, and they say our town is holding its first ever Pride event next month. There is some trepidation. What were others' experience with the first event in a small town? And also comment saying that also we are desperate for visual art pieces for exhibition for a month. if anyone is interested or can help spread the word. So this is, I think, something to pass on to speaker.
I can definitely help their creative collective. What town are you having your event in?
It's Coonabarabran, so you've been talking to Cody out there, but I'm actually run the gallery out there, so that's weird.
If we can connect, that would be amazing, because this is bread and butter stuff for us, and you know we want to be able to be a support mechanism for people, especially the first one. I think that those first few steps are probably the scariest. Brett and Will can speak to that, their experience on their own, but it's, yeah, taking that first step is quite often the hardest. But you do have organizations like ACON which are so keen to be involved and to help. So let's swap email addresses so I can have a chat with you offline, because that would be amazing.
Beautiful, thank you. I think, yeah, there's some, that would answer some really big questions, and I think that would be really helpful. Just going back to the storytelling, as we may all know, we've had the National Cultural Policy Revive launched this week, and their tagline is, or the tagline is, a place for every story and a story for every place. Now, it made me think about the places, and are there enough places and spaces for the diversity of the LGBTQIA+ stories? And if any of the panelists, anyone can jump in here if you've had any thoughts about this, and yeah, would like to share any thoughts.
Any support, and it's a fantastic, and it's great, and I've had a read of that, but sometimes voices from afar are hard to hear. Our voices in rural, remote communities in Australia are very hard to hear. And the perfect example at the moment is Sydney World Pride. But what's happening is Sydney World Pride's reaching out to our communities, asking for our voices to be a part of that. That is such an amazing example of how inclusiveness can work. You know, we've got people like Southwest Arts and ACON who help our voices be heard, you know, outside of our communities. But it's really going to have to really listen carefully, so then all voices are heard. It's easy for the big centres, and you know, quite often Wagga, Albury, Wodonga are classed as the rural centres. They're rural, but the remote communities have got the big stories, have got the heartfelt stories, have got the hard stories, the stories that are still hard to hear and swallow and realise that happens. So I hope we get an opportunity to be heard, and I hope everyone on here gets an opportunity to be heard, because that's fantastic, and everyone should be heard. You know, the example during our Rainbow Plains Festival last year is we had the Dykes on Bikes come. They revved up and down our main street, and the town said, "We heard the festival." You heard us. You didn't hear the festival. You heard us. You heard us be loud and proud. So if we can be loud and louder, and if this is going to help us, then that makes me very excited, because there's a lot of quiet voices that need to be heard.
Thank you, Will. Does anyone else want to jump in? Katie?
Could I just wanted to briefly answer Kerry Ann's question in the chat, or we'll have a stab at it, because this one's here's a can, it's full of worms, so let's give this one a crack. So young people today, are they more accepting in rural communities? As a mother of a queer son, so her son said, my generation doesn't really give a fuck. You are who you are, and it's the older people who need to get over themselves. I don't think this is a rural city thing. I think this is a generational thing. And I do think that it's probably got more to do with money, and it's probably got more to do with climate change than gender expression or sexuality, funnily enough. Because I think the attitude of young people is they don't give a shit. Like they have so much bigger concerns, like climate change, or the fact that the Australian dream of home ownership is pretty well dead for their generation. So how are they ever going to be able to buy a house? You know, will robotics and AI take their jobs in the future? I think that I think that for them, they don't have time to worry about gender and sexuality. And so they experiment and among themselves, somebody will come out and they go, I'm going to be pansexual this week. And their friends go, yeah, I tried it last week. It was pretty good. They just don't have time to excessively worry about that stuff. So I think that's where that attitude comes from. It's an attitude of, oh, look, haven't we solved this yet? Let's just get over that and we'll deal with other things. Or at least that's the attitude that I've noticed. I've just stepped off working on a TV show. I was executive producing a show called Generation Pride, which was all about this. So it was about looking at the different LGBTQIA plus communities through an intergenerational lens. So what is it like to be a 70-year-old trans woman versus what's it like to be, a 14-year-old trans woman today? So that show is still in the works. I had to step off it because I'm flat chat, but that's exactly what we were looking at. So it is a thing and we do want to explore it because that intergenerational divide, it does flavor a lot of issues at the moment, including gender and sexuality.
Thank you, Katie. That's a beautiful answer. We are almost at time. So do any of the panelists want to say anything before I do a quick wrap up? Any last words? Good. All good. All right. Well, thank you all. That was really fantastic. Thank you for all who attended. I'm going to read something just quickly from Revive because I thought this is really apt. So let us begin by telling our own stories. For one way we understand culture is through the stories we tell of ourselves. Stories of belonging, of embodiment, of place. That's page 10 of Revive by Christos Tolkas and Claire Wright, who then continue on page 11 saying, just as our heritage lives on, so art finds us in the perpetual process of becoming. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for Regional Arts New South Wales for presenting the panel. Thank you for Dr. Julia for managing the chat box this morning. Our esteemed speakers, thank you so much. Miss Cadance Bell, Will Miller and Brett Boulton, Gavin Prendergast, for all your words of insight and experiences of being members of the LGBTQIA+ communities across regional New South Wales. Thank you to the audience for your thoughtful questions and participation. And we look forward to having you next month, seeing you again, or the audience for the next episode of The Country Air in March. So thank you so much. It's been really fantastic. And this will be available on the Regional Arts New South Wales website very shortly with Gavin's list of service providers, which I think will be really, really helpful. So thank you. I love you all to bits. Happy Gay Pride and take care.